That favorite shirt of yours that got lost along with the rest of your luggage on a flight to California may have ended up here. The 50,000 square foot store called Unclaimed Baggage in Scottsboro, Alabama, has been the home of lost items for more than 50 years.
Items that get lost most are things like books, coats, headphones, water bottles. Oh my goodness, at the water bottles that come through here any given month.
Jennifer Krittner has worked here for more than 26 years, but this is no lost and found. Folks come here looking to buy others' abandoned things. Susan Boatman visits several times a year, all the way from Orlando, hunting for treasures.
So we came over here and spent about 6 hours. And it was like, oh my gosh, we went home and told everybody in Orlando that we go to this place near my mother-in-law's. It's not near either because we have a time change. So we're 2 hours away and it's about 3, but it was a great day. And my husband gave me today 4 hours.
A local entrepreneur named Doyle Owens started the business in 1970 when he bought his first load of unclaimed baggage in Washington, D.C. for $300.
He brought back about 110 suitcases from a place called Trailways Bus Lines, brought that all the way back to Scottsboro, put an ad in the local paper, and he sold out the very first day. So he knew he was onto something pretty special.
Now the store receives items that go unclaimed from the airlines for 90 days or longer. Krittner said carriers are able to reunite a bag with its owner 99.5% of the time, but that still leaves lots of bags to deal with.
Sometimes items that go unclaimed, they had maybe insurance on their items. Maybe the Egyptian artifacts were insured. I know that's certainly the case with some of the jewelry that comes through, or the individuals are compensated that way. And truthfully, sometimes I think people just leave their bags on purpose. Not worth the hassle to go through to get it back to them.
The store only sells about a third of what it receives. The rest is recycled or donated, while some items end up in a museum at the store.
Conditions at overcrowded shelters in Gaza are making children ill. According to Ahmad Al-Farah and other doctors in the enclave's overwhelmed hospitals. The paediatric ward Al-Farah works on at the Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza, has seen a sharp rise in young patients. Many have infections such as acute gastroenteritis, which he describes as an epidemic.
The number of cases has increased to 4 times its normal levels. Most of the water being consumed by children is unfit for human consumption. Most of the food is canned. People have lost access to fresh food. There's no fruit, no vegetables. Children have had a deficiency in vitamins, immune deficiency, in addition to iron deficiencies and anemia from the lack of nutrition.
Hepatitis A is also appearing at the shelters, he says.
This is a very dangerous indicator that should be paid attention to. From overcrowding and consuming food not fit for human consumption and using shared toilets.
The UN Humanitarian Office warned on Wednesday that Gaza faces a public health disaster due to the collapse of its health system and the spread of disease, as Israel wages an offensive that has hit hospitals and displaced most of Gaza's 2.3 million people. Children are admitted with extreme dehydration to the point of kidney failure, doctors say. They are seeing an increase in breathing problems as families resort to burning wood and garbage to cook. There's also a severe lack of medicines in Gaza, which Israel has blockaded, to treat the children. Mahmoud Abu Shah has taken shelter in this makeshift tent with his 3 children, who are all under 3 years old. Conditions at this camp for the displaced in Khan Yunis are making them ill, he says, and there's little treatment available.
The eldest caught gastroenteritis, then the second, then the third. Day after day, I go to the hospital seeking treatment, but they haven't got the treatment the children need. They gave us some medicine to drink, but it's not enough to cure them.
The World Health Organization has also reported a sharp rise in acute respiratory infections, diarrhea, lice, scabies, and other fast-spreading conditions. Juliette Toomer of the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, says the schools were not built to house people.
Most of the shelters are not equipped with the toilets or the showers or the clean water that people need in these shelters, simply because the numbers of people that came to these shelters is just overwhelming. And also because many of these shelters that we've opened to receive people who were forced to flee their homes were not meant to be shelters.
Gaza's health authorities say about 18,000 people have been confirmed killed and 49,500 injured in Israeli strikes, with thousands more missing and presumed dead under the rubble. Deaths from North Gaza aren't being counted currently because they occur beyond the reach of ambulances and functioning hospitals. Israel launched its war on Gaza to destroy Hamas after the Palestinian militant group sent its fighters on a rampage in Israel that killed 1,200 people.
As Taiwan prepares to vote in the presidential and parliamentary elections next month, polls reveal deep divisions between generations towards its relationship with China. At this government-run veterans' care home in northern Taiwan, this former soldier's chest tattoo of the island's flag carries the complexities of those ties. Wang Zhiquan, who is 93, joined the Chinese army when he was only 13 and holds tragic memories of war.
I still dare not watch the news when I watch TV. War is cruel and cold. When I started serving as a soldier, people were forced to enlist during the civil war between the Kuomintang and the Communist Party. When they couldn't catch adults, they would catch children.
Defeated in the Chinese Civil War, the nationalist Kuomintang government fled to Taiwan 7 odd decades ago, but no peace treaty was ever signed to end the war. China's communist government has since been pushing for what it calls reunification with Taiwan and has ramped up its military pressure against the island in the past few years, stoking fears of a war that could drag in the United States. Those tensions are dominating election campaigns in the run-up to Taiwan's January 13th ballot. The ruling Democratic Progressive Party champions the island's separate identity from China. But despite moving to Taiwan and later fighting for its island of Kinmen, Wang's sense of identity remains tied to China.
Taiwan is a part of China. It has been since the Qing and Ming dynasties.
It's a view shared by many from his generation, like fellow care home resident Sun Guoxi. The 110-year-old veteran believes his current government is being provocative. He warns that if a conflict breaks out, the island would be no match for China. Yet their views conflict with mainstream Taiwan, who overwhelmingly view themselves as Taiwanese and not Chinese, according to polls. He is political scientist Song Wen-ti.
There is certainly a generational shift. The older generation was a lot more likely to be for unification, and the younger generation a lot less likely. The younger people tend to have a separate, almost distinct Taiwanese national identity, as opposed to a more Chinese national identity. So in that sense, the trend lines on support for unification is a downward one, less and less support for unification over time.
The main opposition party, the pro-China KMT, has cast the election as a choice between war and peace, a line Beijing has echoed. But as campaigning heats up, some in Taiwan are hoping to mend rifts rather than further the divide. As this 22-year-old says, we can only try our best to understand the others and learn why they might have certain ideas. Even if we can't agree with each other, as humans, we should still be able to talk normally.
The Israeli military on Wednesday released this footage purporting to show fierce house-to-house battles with Hamas militants in the shell-shocked Shajaya district of Gaza City. And it showcases how, despite Israel's overwhelming superiority in the air, in tanks, and with artillery, Palestinian resistance remains lethal. Underscoring that reality, Israel said on Wednesday 10 of its soldiers were killed in an ambush in the prior 24 hours in an operation to rescue another group of soldiers that came under fire. Among those killed were Lieutenant Colonel Tomer Grinberg, who was buried on Wednesday. It was the worst one-day loss since 15 soldiers were killed on October 31st. fighting has only intensified amid the rubble in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, where Israel had previously claimed its military objectives had been largely met. Israel's devastating assault on Gaza has killed more than 18,000 Palestinians, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, including thousands of young children. This body was recovered from the rubble of an airstrike in Rafah. This man cries, "These are children. Children. Do they kill anyone other than children?" The death toll has sparked an international outcry. The United Nations General Assembly this week passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire. Israel's foreign minister on Wednesday said it would wage war on Hamas with or without international support after militants launched a surprise attack on October 7th, rampaging through Israeli communities, killing 1,200 people and taking hundreds of hostages. Gazans fleeing destruction have crowded into shelters in the south, overwhelming the health system already strained by a lack of fuel and medicine. Lynn Hastings is the United Nations humanitarian coordinator for the occupied Palestinian territories.
We all know that the healthcare system is or has collapsed. We've got a textbook formula for epidemics and a public health disaster. This is in part, of course, because the shelters have long ago exceeded their full capacity, with people lining up for hours just to get to a toilet, one toilet available for hundreds of people. You can imagine what the sanitation conditions are like as a result.
White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan plans to travel to Israel on Thursday and Friday to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu amid U.S. efforts to pressure Israel to dial back what President Joe Biden has called the, quote, indiscriminate bombing of Gaza.
Argentina on Tuesday said it is devaluing its currency, the peso, by over a half.
Javier Gerardo Milei.
It's part of a series of measures coming days after new Libertarian President Javier Milei assumed office that his government says aim to salvage the country's deteriorating economy. Other measures include cutting energy and transport subsidies, as well as a halt to seeking contracts for public works. New Economy Minister Luis Caputo.
As I said before, there is no money to pay for more public infrastructure, which, as we all know, often ends up in the pockets of politicians and business people. Public works have always been one of the main sources of state corruption, and with us, that will end.
Caputo said the plan would be painful in the short term, but was necessary to cut the fiscal deficit and bring down triple-digit inflation. He added Argentina had recorded a fiscal deficit for 113 of the last 123 years, which he said was the cause of the country's economic woes. Its latest inflation rate stands at nearly 150%. The economic package was welcomed by the International Monetary Fund, which loaned Argentina $44 billion last year. Now the key doubt is whether Milei's coalition, which is only the third largest bloc in Congress, can implement the ambitious cuts. Credit rating company Fitch said in a Monday commentary that Milei's party has little representation in the legislature, adding alliances with more influential parties remain in flux.
The maker of Dove soap faces a probe over possible greenwashing. Household goods giant Unilever is under investigation by watchdogs in the UK. The Competition and Markets Authority says it wants to make sure shoppers aren't being misled. It says the move comes after an initial review uncovered concerns that the firm could be overstating how green some products are. Unilever said it was surprised and disappointed by the news. It denied all suggestion that it had made misleading claims and said it would cooperate fully with the probe. Shares in the firm fell in early trades on Tuesday. The CMA has been stepping up scrutiny of companies which make green claims. In January, it launched a wider probe, joining regulators in the US and Europe in cracking down on greenwashing. The watchdog says it has not yet launched official investigations into any other companies. It says possible outcomes of the Unilever probe include requiring operational changes or even taking the company to court.
$17 miliard.
Państwa, w 2022 roku wartość inwestycji zagranicznych przez 8 lat rządów naszych poprzedników w relacji do PKB.
Przyjemnie się to ogląda, można usłyszeć ciekawe rzeczy, ciekawe opinie, także jako taka nietypowa rozrywka dla wielu jest to na pewno zajmujące.
Zdaniem to był głupi żart, żeby 11 grudnia, czyli tę zmianę władzy obejrzeć w kinie w godnych warunkach.
48 posłów, przeciw 201, nikt się nie wstrzymał. Stwierdzam, że Sejm
Hearing no objection, it is so decided.
COP28 climate summit nations on Wednesday agreed to a deal to, quote, transition away from fossil fuels, which scientists say is the last best hope to avert climate catastrophe. The historic deal was struck by nearly 200 countries gathered for the conference. It marks the first time in 3 decades of COP climate summits that nations have agreed on a concerted move away from oil, gas, and coal, which account for about 80% of global energy. The future role of fossil fuels has by far been the most contentious issue at the 2-week COP28 summit in Dubai. Negotiations had faced resistance from members of the OPEC oil producer group and its allies, especially Saudi Arabia, according to sources familiar with the discussions. And an earlier draft was criticized by scores of countries for failing to call for a, quote, phase-out of fossil fuels. The new draft came after overtime negotiations at the conference stretched late into the early hours of Wednesday morning. The deal calls for, quote, transitioning away from fossil fuels in energy systems in a just, orderly, and equitable manner, so as to achieve net zero by 2050 in keeping with the science. It also calls for a global tripling of renewable energy capacity by 2030, speeding up efforts to reduce coal, and accelerating technologies such as carbon capture and storage that can clean up sectors difficult to decarbonize. Deals struck at UN climate summits must be passed by consensus, at which point individual countries are responsible for executing on the agreements.
Shoppers around the world look to be buying cheaper gifts this holiday season. Hit by a high cost of living, many are now cash-strapped, and figures from the UK suggest the taste of a lower-cost presents is proving a boon to chocolatiers. Quality street maker Nestlé and Cadbury owner Mondelez have both seen higher sales in Britain. Business executives say many consumers have ignored toys and gadgets in favour of chocolate, which are still relatively inexpensive despite price rises this year. Nestlé said boxed chocolates have seen a year-on-year rise of 8.7% in value sales over August to November. The company said shoppers typically spend under £10 or $13 on such items. Tins of Nestlé's Quality Street traded around $6.30, while Mondelez's Cadbury Selection boxes cost less than $2. Both are proving popular. In contrast, one leading data firm says the average selling price of a toy in Europe is about $16.30. A number of toy makers told Reuters earlier this month that demand was lower this year. The UK supermarkets have also helped out chocolate companies. Sainsbury's and Tesco have offered discounts on big brands to customers with loyalty cards. One leading survey said 9 out of 10 British Gen Z shoppers will trade down to cheaper products this holiday season, while 83% of millennial shoppers will do the same. Overall, almost 3/4 of respondents said they would buy cheaper gifts.
Yes or no? The president of the University of Pennsylvania has tendered her resignation, according to a message sent by the chair of the school's Board of Trustees. Liz McGill came under fire after she declined to say outright during a congressional hearing that calling for the genocide of Jews would violate Penn's code of conduct.
I am asking, specifically calling for the genocide of Jews, does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
So the answer is yes.
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
She faced growing calls to resign, even as she sought to clarify her position in a social media post.
I was not focused on, but I should have been, the irrefutable fact
that a call for genocide of Jewish people is a call for some of the most terrible violence human beings can perpetrate.
McGill has agreed to stay on until an interim president is appointed and will remain a tenured faculty member, according to the chair of the Board of Trustees.
At Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment, yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
Along with McGill, Harvard University President Claudine Gay and Massachusetts Institute of Technology President Sally Kornbluth also testified. They were criticized by their school's Jewish communities for tolerating anti-Semitism, especially in statements by pro-Palestinian demonstrators since the Islamist group Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. That attack prompted a massive counterattack by Israel.